Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you categorically, without a shadow of a doubt, this is a 100% fact that Trump never praised a person that is the most despicable human being who's ever walked on this earth. If you want to say one of the most, fine. To me, he's the most despicable, the most evil human being who's ever walked on this earth. CNN, Trump allegedly praised as doing a lot of good things, new book claims. Why would you care about what gossip and hearsay, which is certainly false, is claimed? Why would you care about what gossip and hearsay is written about in a new book? The book is a public relations stunt, just like every book written about Trump. If you don't like Trump, fine. But this is not journalism. CNBC, Trump praised to Chief of Staff John Kelly during Europe trip. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Do you think that okay, The Atlantic, Trump disparaged fallen Americans. How do you know? Because The Atlantic said it had a source. Every time that a source, or that, like, for example, the Washington Post has to prove that Trump actually was quoted to have stated something, they have to retract their claims. So Trump did not state the things the Washington Post stated a couple weeks back. So this new book is yet again another, author Michael Bender reports, remarks shocked John Kelly, author Michael Bender reports. How do you know this? You can't disprove a negative, and you certainly can't make a claim based on gossip, hearsay, and mean-spirited innuendo, or you cannot make a claim about someone based on gossip, or based on hearsay, or based on what somebody said, what is alleged that somebody said, or what somebody is said to have stated, or alleged to have stated. This is a basic concept in life. They despise Trump so much that things that you learn in kindergarten, things that you learn in life at an early age, don't spread hearsay or gossip about somebody. This is like a backbone of society, all societies, okay? Hit subscribe to this channel right now. I am a Jewish American, had my bar mitzvah in Israel, in Jerusalem. I take my cultural background very seriously. I wrote numerous op-eds in the Jerusalem Post defending President Trump, and also explaining, for example, how AOC made the most distorted historical and revisionist historical claims that were actually refuted by Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. You can read my Jerusalem Post op-ed on hagoodman.com. I have numerous Jerusalem Post op-eds and numerous articles also in the Times of Israel. And what they need to do, and they do this with my cultural background, they might do this with your cultural background. President Trump got a greater percentage of the non-white vote in 2020 than in 2016. This is a fact. President Trump got a greater percentage of the LGBTQ vote. This is a fact. President Trump, by one estimate, got a greater percentage of the Jewish vote. Jewish American vote in 2020. Okay, hit subscribe to this channel, because if you want my perspective as a Jewish American, there's no greater president for people of my cultural background around the world. He was the first president, or the only president ever, to truly even Bernie Sanders voted to move the embassy to Jerusalem. This is, like, on the left, the biggest catastrophe of all time. You don't do that if you are an anti-Semitic person. Meanwhile, Democrats have Democrats have quotes that we can all look at that is actually true anti-Semitism. But you don't do that if you have a bias or any type of negative feelings towards the Jewish people. Recognize the Golan as Israel's. And yes, these are things that Jewish Americans care about. Generally, people of my cultural background care about Israel. On the left and in American society or political life, there's this view that, it's like I can't really talk about, you can't talk about anything nowadays, but mainly because of the left or Democrats, because the truth is like the worst, it's like their kryptonite. President Trump signed an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses. You cannot make certain absurd analogies, okay, explaining what's taking place in that region of the world. You can't distort history. You can't utilize the history of the 1930s, what the 1930s and 1940s Germans did, which Trump is said to have, in a book, praised their leader, which is a complete lie. That's the big lie of today. Let's just look at this man. President Trump signed an executive order combating anti-Semitism. He was the first president, I believe, to pray at the Kotel, which is the Western Wall. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which is something that every Orthodox person of my faith wants or appreciates. Recognize the Golan Heights as Israel's. You might say, well, what does that have to do with praising you-know-who, the most despicable man who's ever lived? It has a lot to do with that, or has a lot to do with that being absurd. It has a lot to do with proving that is a libelous claim. But then again, this is like 8th grade. This is like American political life has turned into a dysfunctional 7th grade class. You said this. How do we know? Because Becky said it in one of her notes, and she said she heard you say that you praised and you said good things about the 1930s and 1940s Germans leader. Becky said it in her notes. Yeah, really? I knew he would. And let's talk about it. And now CNBC and CNN and it's so you have then you have the Abraham Accords, which were a huge political triumph that President Trump presided over, which helped further peace within, from a geopolitical perspective, not within certain regions next to Israel, but you have the Abraham Accords. You have moving the embassy to Jerusalem. You have recognizing the Golans as Israel's. You have signing an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses, which is running rampant. Okay. You have a president that defended the only Jewish state in the world, while Democrats and left-leaning voters claim to oppose the 1930s and 1940s Germans, while at the same time wanting that state to no longer exist. Think about the absolute mindless, absurd hypocrisy. I mean, the epitome of hypocrisy and the mindlessness of this warped morality that the left and Democrats and everyone who doesn't like Trump think. They think he's the 1930s, the reincarnation of the 1930s and 1940s German leader, while at the same time wanting the only state in the entire planet, very small little area, to completely disappear, which is exactly what the 1930s and 1940s German leader, and I can't say his name because of the algorithm, would want. Think about that. Think about that for a second. And I'm not even thinking clearly because there's probably a whole lot more. Israelis and religious Jews loved President Trump in every poll. That's a fact. And the reason that he's loved is also the reason that you have media who are trying every possible way to tear him down. For my African American and black viewers, especially watching, Democrats do the same thing to distort my history, the suffering that my people have gone through. They do the same thing to distort historical suffering, utilizing the suffering that my people have gone through as in the same manner that they utilize to the suffering of in terms of within African American and black history in this country. Democrats will look and they'll say, here's a historical time period, good versus evil. Trump falls into the evil part. And they will twist and they'll ignore if Biden says you ain't who you are if you don't vote for him. And they'll ignore if Democrats say certain things that are overtly prejudice against a certain religion. Anyway, I can go on forever, but it's like I have to kind of watch what I say, so hit subscribe right now. Trump never said that. He never praised anybody that he shouldn't have. That he never praised the 1930s and 1940s Germans, the German leader. It never happened because it's so absurd. And his Ivanka Trump is Jewish, married Jared Kushner, so that alone should show. And then you hear, oh, you don't have to be. It's like, oh, here we go. It's just basic logic. You can't, if you try to communicate basic logic to a liberal Democrat who feels that he or she is morally superior and just has utter contempt for Trump, it's like trying to explain physics to an amoeba. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, if anything, as an American who should be offended by what Trump allegedly said in a book, I'm here to tell you categorically, anyone who believes this mindless, absurd gossip, they're the ones very likely who would be susceptible to that type of evil leader from years past. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now.